A stillness blanketed the isolated farm, the kind of quiet that felt almost sacred, where even the wind seemed to hold its breath. It was supposed to be an ordinary night, a mere whisper of darkness stretching across fields bathed in moonlight. But then, just after midnight, a blinding flash pierced the tranquility. A luminous orb that glided silently over the crops, pulsating with an eerie rhythm, as if it were alive. In an instant, the air thickened, charged with an unnameable tension. The animals froze, their eyes wide with fear, sensing something beyond the veil of the ordinary. This was no mere trick of light. It was as if the very fabric of reality had shifted, leaving behind a haunting question. What had come to carve a perfect circle into the heart of the night? As the light vanished, an unsettling silence fell over the land once more, but something had changed. A sense of dread lingered, echoing with the unspoken thought, what if this was just the beginning? The stillness blanketed the isolated farm, the kind of quiet that felt almost sacred, where even the wind seemed to hold its breath. It was supposed to be an ordinary night, a mere whisper of darkness stretching across fields bathed in moonlight. The only sounds to be heard were the distant croaking of frogs and the soft rustle of leaves, the serene backdrop to a life lived far from the chaos of cities. But as the clock struck midnight, an unexpected turn of events unraveled the fabric of this tranquility. A blinding flash pierced the calm, a luminous orb gliding silently over the crops, pulsating with an eerie rhythm, as if it were alive. The light was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed. It was not merely bright, but seemed to possess a sentience of its own, breathing in and out, casting shadows that danced across the fields. The air thickened, charged with an unnameable tension that hung like a heavy fog, pressing down on the chest and making it hard to breathe. The farm's animals froze, their instincts kicking in. A horse whinnied nervously in the distance, a sound that echoed through the silence, reverberating against the walls of the old barn. Chickens huddled together, feathers ruffled, their wide eyes reflecting the strange glow. Even the night creatures, usually so full of life, seemed to retreat into the shadows, overwhelmed by an unseen force. The stillness felt alive, as if the very essence of the night was holding back something monumental, something that lurked just beyond the threshold of perception. "Did you see that?" whispered Jake the farmhand, his voice barely above a breath as he stood by the barn door, his eyes wide with disbelief. He turned to Mary, the farmer's daughter, who had just stepped out, clutching her sweater tightly around her shoulders. I don't know what I just saw," she replied, her eyes darting toward the fields where the light had disappeared. It was like a firefly, but so much bigger. And it moved differently. Her voice trembled, and she took a step back, her foot crunching on the gravel. The sound echoed unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. They exchanged frightened glances, the kind that spoke volumes without needing words. The familiar landscape transformed into a realm of uncertainty. The fields, once merely rows of crops swaying gently in the breeze, now appeared as a canvas for something otherworldly. The moon hung high above, casting a silvery light that mingled with the strange illumination, creating a surreal tableau that felt both beautiful and terrifying. It was as if the very fabric of reality had shifted, twisting and turning into shapes that defied explanation. What had come to carve a perfect circle into the heart of the night? Jake's voice trembled as he pondered, his brow furrowed in concern. "I don't want to think about it," Mary replied, her voice barely holding steady. "What if it's something not human?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. An inexplicable dread seeped into the bones of the farm, a sensation that whispered of things that existed just beyond sight. The light vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind an unsettling silence that enveloped the land like a shroud. But something had changed irrevocably. An invisible thread of tension wove itself into the fabric of the night, a haunting reminder of the unknown. As the seconds ticked by, the world outside remained still, but the heart of the farm pulsated with an underlying fear. Shadows danced where moments before there had been only serenity, and the air carried a weight that seemed to press down on the shoulders of anyone who dared to breathe it in. The echoes of the night grew louder, filled with the sounds of distant rustling, like whispers of secrets long buried beneath the soil. It felt as though the land itself was alive, aware of the events that had unfolded under its watchful gaze. "Do you hear that?" Jake asked suddenly, his voice dropping to a whisper as he strained to listen. Mary nodded, her heart racing. "It's like something is moving out there, but there's nothing there." She squinted into the darkness, feeling a chill run down her spine. The stars twinkled above, indifferent to the turmoil brewing below, and the farm, once a comforting bastion of normalcy, felt transformed into a stage for something far greater than itself. The pulse of the earth seemed to quicken, and in the depths of that silence, a promise lingered that whatever had come to the fields, whatever had illuminated the night with its otherworldly glow, was not finished yet. It was only the beginning, and the dread that lingered in the air was a foreboding reminder that the story was far from over. "Let's go back inside," Mary urged, glancing back toward the barn. "I don't like this." "Wait," Jake said, his eyes still locked on the spot where the light had been. "What if we miss something? What if—" "No, Jake. What if it sees us?" she interrupted, pulling him back gently. "I don't want to be out here anymore." Her voice cracked, betraying the fear that twisted in her stomach. "But what if it's trying to communicate?" he pressed, desperation creeping into his tone. "What if it needs us to understand?" "Understand what?" Mary shot back, her eyes wide with panic. "We don't even know what it is. What if it's dangerous?" The tension hung thick between them, and for a moment, time stood still. The shadows loomed larger, as if they were listening, waiting for the next move. Mary's breath quickened, and she could feel the pulse in her throat, a rhythmic reminder of her racing heart. "Listen," Jake said finally, lowering his voice to a hush. "If something is out there, shouldn't we at least find out?" "No, just no," she insisted, her voice rising in urgency. "We're not equipped for whatever this is. We need to get inside before—" "Before what?" he interrupted, his frustration boiling over. "Before it gets us. Mary, running away won't change anything. We have to face it." The wind picked up slightly, sending a shiver down their spines as if echoing Mary's fear. The night was alive, and with it came the weight of an unspeakable truth. In the darkness that followed, the farm stood still, yet the atmosphere crackled with potential, a silent invitation to delve deeper into the mysteries that lay ahead. The question remained, echoing through the stillness. What had truly happened that night, and what awaited in the shadows of the fields? The night unfurled like a dark tapestry, heavy with unspoken fears and the distant rustle of leaves. The cool air was thick with the scent of damp earth, mingling with the haunting aroma of something metallic, something that seemed to linger just beyond comprehension. Mary closed her eyes for a moment, trying to silence the storm of thoughts crashing against the walls of her mind. But even in the darkness, the moment felt electric, charged with an energy that prickled her skin like static before a storm. "Jake," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "Can you feel that?" He nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the expanse of the fields before them. The deep shadows between the rows of corn seemed to ripple, as if something unseen had stirred within. It was as though the darkness itself was alive, breathing, watching them with 1,000 unknown eyes. Just then, a soft rustling broke the stillness, a sound that didn't belong to the usual chorus of nocturnal creatures. It was a low, rhythmic pulse, a vibration that seemed to resonate through the ground, sending tiny tremors up their legs. Mary's heart raced, each beat a desperate plea for safety. She clutched Jake's arm, her nails sinking into his flesh, a tangible reminder of her fear. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jake turned to her, fear mirroring her own. "What was that?" he breathed, his eyes wide. The wind swirled, carrying with it an otherworldly whisper that seemed to echo secrets from the depths of the earth. The distant howl of an owl punctuated the night, but it felt more like an omen than a comfort, each note hanging in the air like a warning. The barn loomed behind them, a shadowy sentinel against the night sky, but it felt like a prison now, its familiar walls suddenly suffocating. Mary felt the weight of the silence, thick and oppressive, as if the very night itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. She glanced back toward the barn, a flicker of longing in her chest. It was a place of warmth, of laughter, of safety, yet now it felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the primal fear that gripped her. "Jake, we should go back," she insisted, her voice rising with urgency. "Whatever that noise was, it's not normal. This isn't just some strange light, something is wrong." But Jake remained stubborn, the glimmer of curiosity igniting a spark in his eyes. "What if it's something incredible?" he countered, his voice low but fervent. "What if it's a sign? We can't just ignore it. We have to know what's happening out there." Mary shook her head, her breath hitching in her throat. "You don't understand," she exclaimed, her fear spilling over. "This isn't an adventure. It's dangerous. We're not equipped to handle whatever this is." She felt her voice crack, the tension coiling tighter around her chest. As if in response to her words, the wind shifted, and the air grew heavier. The distant rustling morphed into a low hum, a sound that vibrated through the air and into their bones, almost melodic yet dissonant, like an ancient hymn sung by unseen voices. The sound wrapped around them, clawing at the edges of their sanity, beckoning them closer to the unknown. "Just a little closer," Jake urged, his eyes alight with determination. "We can't let fear dictate our actions. We have to see it, whatever it is." "Jake, please," Mary begged, desperation tinging her plea. "What if it's not meant for us? What if it's observing us? We're intruding on something we don't understand." The air crackled with tension as they stood at the precipice of the unknown, two hearts racing against the rhythm of a night that seemed to pulse with life. In the distance, the fields stretched out like a canvas, dark and inviting, yet tinged with the chilling promise of peril. Shapes moved within the corn, not quite discernible, yet their presence was undeniable, an echo of something ancient, something that whispered of a time before time. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the night, a sound so primal it felt like it came from the very core of the earth. Mary's blood ran cold as the sound echoed through the farm, reverberating off the barn's walls, and her instincts screamed at her to run. The scream faded into the night, leaving a haunting silence that felt almost worse than the sound itself. A silence pregnant with unspoken dread. "Did you hear that?" she gasped, her pulse quickening. Her thoughts raced as she scanned the darkness, searching for its source. What was that? Jake's eyes widened, and for a moment the bravado fled his face, replaced by the cold grip of fear. "I don't know," he stammered, backing away instinctively. "We should." Before he could finish his thought, the ground beneath them trembled once more, sending a ripple through the earth, and the air grew thick with the scent of ozone, sharp and electric. It was a sign, an unmistakable indication that whatever was happening was escalating, moving closer, and they were at the center of it. "Let's get back inside," Mary urged, her voice now a frantic whisper. She grasped Jake's hand tightly, pulling him back toward the barn, the once comforting structure now a fragile barrier against the unknown. But even as they turned, the air seemed to push against them, a force trying to draw them back into the darkness, back into the fields where shadows danced and secrets lurked. With every step they took, the hum intensified, vibrating in their bones, a siren's call that promised answers but threatened to unravel everything they knew. The barn loomed closer, yet the shadows felt longer, darker, as if the night itself was an entity, hungry and alive, watching their every move. Mary's heart raced, her instincts screaming for them to flee, but Jake's resolve held him firm. "We can't turn back now," he insisted, his voice steady, though the tremor in his hands betrayed his fear. "Whatever is out there, it's not done with us yet." And in that moment, as they stood on the precipice of fear and discovery, the very fabric of the night seemed to shift, the unknown swirling around them like a tempest, and they realized one irrevocable truth. The darkness was not merely a backdrop to their fears. It was an active participant in their fate, a force that would not be ignored. The boundaries of their reality began to blur, and as they stepped closer to the barn, they knew that whatever awaited them in the fields was only the beginning of something far more complex, something that would challenge everything they believed. Together they crossed the threshold of the barn, leaving behind the palpable tension of the night. But the shadows outside whispered promises of revelations yet to come, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead coiled tightly around their hearts, an ever-present reminder that the mysterious glow in the fields was only the beginning of a far deeper enigma. The night enveloped the barn like a thick, suffocating blanket. The once reassuring walls now felt like a prison of uncertainty. Within, the familiar sense of hay and aged wood clashed with the acrid tang of fear. Mary and Jake stood in the dim light, their breaths shallow, the silence around them heavy, as if the very air was holding its breath, waiting. Outside, the wind whispered through the cracks, carrying with it the weight of the unknown. It felt like 1,000 voices murmuring secrets just beyond comprehension, each one teasing the edge of their sanity. The hum from the fields had not dissipated. Rather, it pulsated through the barn's wooden beams, a low, resonant thrum that seemed to sync with their racing hearts. It was as if the barn itself was alive, trembling with the vibrations of something ancient and unfathomable. Mary's gaze flickered to the barn door, the darkness beyond a yawning chasm that threatened to swallow them whole. "What if it comes here?" she whispered, the thought curling around her mind like a creeping vine. The idea of the unknown entity breaching the fragile barrier of safety sent a shiver down her spine. In the depths of her mind, she envisioned the shadows creeping in, wrapping around them like tendrils of smoke, suffocating and insidious. "Listen," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer to the door, straining to hear over the cacophony of his own anxiety. The hum outside had shifted. It was no longer a singular sound, but a collage of vibrations, almost melodic, weaving through the night like an unearthly symphony. It ebbed and flowed, rising in pitch and intensity, as if something was orchestrating an unseen performance in the fields, beckoning them to bear witness. Mary felt her pulse quicken, an instinctual dread clawing at her throat. She reached for Jake's arm, the warmth of his skin a stark contrast to the chill that enveloped the barn. "What if we shouldn't have come back here?" she urged, her voice cracking under the weight of panic. The shadows outside seemed to pulse in time with the hum, a dark dance that made her insides twist with fear. Jake's eyes darted to the window, where the faintest flicker of light seeped through the cracks. It was not the warm glow of the farmhouse lanterns, but a cold, ethereal luminescence that danced just beyond their vision. "We need to know what it is," he insisted, though the tremor in his voice betrayed the resolve he tried to project. "This could be our only chance to understand what's happening." As if in response to his words, a sudden stillness fell over the barn, a silence so profound it set their teeth on edge. The hum faded, replaced by an eerie quiet that felt laden with expectation, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. And then from outside came a sound that made their blood run cold, a low, resonant thud, like a heartbeat echoing in the void, pulsating through the very ground beneath them. Mary leaned closer to Jake, her heart racing in a frantic rhythm. "What was that?" she breathed, her voice barely audible. It was a sound that felt ancient, as if the earth itself was awakening, stirring from a slumber that had lasted millennia. The air grew thick with tension, every instinct screaming at them to flee, yet they remained frozen, caught in the web of fear and curiosity. Without warning, the barn door creaked open, the hinges protesting against the stillness. A gust of wind swept in, cold and sharp, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something metallic, something that sent a wave of nausea through Mary. She felt the urge to retreat, to hide away from whatever was lurking outside. But Jake stepped forward, driven by an insatiable need to uncover the truth. "Stay close," he instructed, though his voice trembled as he peered into the darkness. The light from the fields flickered again, a pulse of luminescence that seemed to beckon them, drawing them toward the unknown. The shadows shifted, swirling like smoke, and for a fleeting moment, Mary thought she saw shapes moving just beyond the threshold, undulating in the glow. "Jake," she warned, but he was already stepping outside, the weight of the night pressing down on him like an unseen force. The barn felt miles away as he crossed the threshold, the darkness enveloping him in a shroud. Mary hesitated, her heart pounding against her ribs, torn between the instinct to pull him back and the desperate need to know what lay beyond. Then, as if the night itself had eyes, she felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. It was a prickling awareness that crawled across her skin, sending chills coursing through her veins. The shadows were alive, swirling with a purpose that was both intriguing and terrifying. She followed Jake into the night, the air thick with the electric charge of the unknown, every step a descent into a mystery that promised to unravel the very fabric of their lives. As they stood together in the open field, the light from the mysterious source illuminated the landscape, revealing patterns etched into the earth, geometric shapes that defied explanation. Mary's breath caught in her throat as she gazed at the intricate designs, their perfection both beautiful and terrifying. It was a tapestry woven into the fabric of the night, a message from the cosmos that whispered of ancient knowledge and cosmic secrets. The hum returned, louder now, resonating through the ground and into their bones, a heartbeat of the universe that echoed in time with their own. And in that moment, as they faced the inexplicable, the realization struck them. They were not merely observers of this phenomena. They were part of it, ensnared in a reality that transcended human understanding. The darkness was alive, and whatever was happening was escalating, moving closer, and they were at the center of it all. The night unfurled around them, a velvet cloak woven with the threads of uncertainty and awe. As Mary and Jake stood in the heart of the field, the air thrummed with an electric tension, a palpable energy that seemed to ripple through the very fabric of their beings. The luminescent glow pulsated softly, casting ghostly shadows that danced on the blades of grass, each flicker revealing and concealing, as if the earth itself was breathing, alive with secrets. Mary's eyes darted across the patterns etched into the soil, their geometric precision defying the wild chaos of nature surrounding them. Circles within circles, spirals that seemed to spiral into infinity, and lines that connected them in ways that felt both familiar and alien. Her heart raced as she tried to comprehend the artistry woven into the ground beneath her feet. It was as if the universe had conspired to communicate something profound, something that lay just beyond her grasp. The patterns pulsated in rhythm with the sound surrounding them. A low, resonant hum that felt like an echo of creation, vibrating not just in the air, but in the very marrow of her bones. Jake stepped closer to the largest formation, his hand reaching out as if drawn by an invisible thread. The moment his fingers brushed the surface, the hum crescendoed into a symphony of sound, a metallic resonance that filled the air, vibrating with a deep, unsettling frequency. Mary felt it in her chest, a thrumming that matched her heartbeat, quickening with every second that passed. The world around them seemed to shift, the shadows elongating and twisting as if responding to the surge of energy unleashed by Jake's touch. "Jake, wait!" Mary's voice trembled, caught between fear and fascination. The air thickened, heavy with an unnameable weight, as if the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. She could hear it, the whispers of the night, a cacophony of muted sounds that seemed to rise and fall in a haunting melody, echoing across the fields. The wind, usually a gentle companion, now howled like a beast, its mournful cries seeping into her very soul. The darkness felt alive, pulsating with an awareness that sent chills racing down her spine. As Jake stood transfixed, absorbed by the strange beauty of the formation, Mary's gaze drifted upward. The stars above flickered with an intensity she had never seen before, their light almost pulsating, as if they too were reacting to the phenomenon below. A shiver coursed through her, and she instinctively stepped closer to Jake, seeking comfort in his presence. But as she neared him, she felt a sudden shift in the energy around them, a subtle but undeniable change that made her skin crawl. "Do you feel that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible against the rising wind. Jake nodded, his eyes wide, reflecting the glow of the patterns beneath them. He seemed entranced, caught in a web of fascination and fear. The air crackled, alive with something that felt both wondrous and malevolent, as if a threshold had been crossed, and they were now standing on the precipice of something far beyond their understanding. Without warning, the hum transformed into a sharp, metallic ringing, slicing through the night like a knife. The ground vibrated violently beneath their feet, and Mary stumbled, her heart racing as panic surged within her. It was as if the earth was protesting their presence, warning them of an impending revelation that could shatter their reality. Jake lurched back, eyes darting around as if searching for an escape, but the light seemed to cocoon them, wrapping them in an embrace both comforting and suffocating. Then, in the midst of the chaos, the light shifted. It brightened, illuminating the field in a blinding brilliance that made Mary shield her eyes. Shapes began to emerge from the shadows, elongated forms that writhed and twisted in the glare, their movements fluid and otherworldly. Mary's breath hitched, terror gripping her heart as the realization dawned upon her. Whatever had drawn them here was no mere coincidence. They were not alone. "Mary!" Jake's voice broke through her reverie, panic lacing his tone. She turned, the light casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward her, fingers of darkness reaching out from the edges of her vision. She could feel the pulse of the night quickening, a heartbeat that echoed in her ears, urging her to flee. Yet a part of her was anchored to the ground, mesmerized by the unfolding mystery. The light flickered again, revealing the intricate patterns on the earth, now glowing with a life of their own, shifting and changing as if a cosmic dance was taking place before their very eyes. Mary felt a deep, primal fear knotting her stomach. The shapes seemed to pulsate with a consciousness as if the very patterns were alive, communicating in a language that transcended words. And then, just as swiftly as it had begun, the cacophony of sound dimmed, the vibrations receding into a haunting silence that enveloped them. The shapes faded back into the darkness, leaving only the ethereal glow of the formations behind. Mary stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest, the air thick with anticipation. What had they just witnessed? As the silence descended, a chilling thought crept into her mind. What if their presence had awakened something that was meant to remain hidden? The night felt heavy with the weight of the unknown, and as she turned to Jake, the look in his eyes mirrored her own fear and confusion. They were no longer just witnesses. They had become part of this enigmatic tapestry woven into the fabric of the cosmos, and the danger of discovery lingered like a specter in the shadows. And somewhere, in the depths of the night, something stirred, watching, waiting, as if aware that the boundaries of their reality had begun to fray. The sensation of being observed returned, a cold shiver crawling up Mary's spine. She glanced into the darkness, and for a fleeting moment she thought she saw a pair of eyes glowing faintly in the distance, a silent witness to their intrusion, a reminder that some mysteries were never meant to be uncovered. The air hung heavy with an unsettling stillness as the remnants of the phenomenon faded into the shadows, leaving Mary and Jake caught in an unsettling limbo of disbelief and dread. The darkness around them seemed to tighten, wrapping around them like a shroud as they both stood in an uneasy silence. The once vibrant patterns on the ground now lay still and unyielding, yet the memory of their pulsating glow lingered in Mary's mind, an echo of a cosmic heartbeat that seemed to resonate with her own. "Did you see that?" Jake whispered, his voice barely above a breath, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile veil of quiet that enveloped them. Mary nodded, her throat tight, the enormity of what they had just witnessed crashing down upon her like a tidal wave. She could feel the remnants of the vibration still thrumming in her bones, a ghostly resonance that intertwined with the very fabric of her being. Suddenly, the distant sound of rustling leaves broke the silence, sending a jolt of adrenaline surging through her veins. It was as if the night itself had awakened, stirring from a deep slumber, and she could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon them, a palpable pressure that made her skin prickle. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee from the unknown. Yet her feet remained rooted to the ground, held captive by a mix of fear and an insatiable curiosity that clawed at her insides. The wind picked up, carrying with it an eerie whisper, a sound that felt almost sentient, curling around her mind, weaving in and out of her thoughts. It was a melody of uncertainty, a haunting lullaby that beckoned her deeper into the enigma of the night. She turned her gaze back to the field, the contours of the land now shrouded in darkness, the shapes that had once danced before them now mere shadows of their former selves. Yet, the air was thick with an unshakable tension, as if the land itself held its breath, waiting for something to unfold. "What do you think it means?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper, as if speaking the words aloud would summon whatever force had stirred the night. Mary could see the uncertainty etched on his face, the way his eyes darted around, searching the darkness for answers. "I don't know," she replied, her voice trembling, "but I feel like we're not alone." Her heart raced, a frantic rhythm matching the pulsing energy that seemed to envelop them. The shadows around them felt alive, shifting and twisting, as if the very ground beneath them were alive with secrets begging to be uncovered. Then, in that moment of heightened awareness, a low, resonant hum began to vibrate through the air, a sound that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. It was a deep, rolling tone that resonated in her chest, a frequency that felt ancient and powerful. Mary exchanged a glance with Jake, the fear evident in his wide eyes, mirroring her own growing alarm. The hum grew louder, enveloping them, a cosmic chorus that stirred something primal within her, awakening a deep-seated dread that clawed at her sanity. Without warning, the sound abruptly ceased, plunging them back into an oppressive silence, leaving an echo of anticipation hanging in the air. It was then that Mary noticed the animals. Their usual nocturnal symphony had fallen silent. The crickets, the owls, even the rustling of the trees had stilled, leaving an eerie void that amplified the rising tension. The world around them felt unnaturally still, as if nature itself held its breath, waiting for the next act in this unfolding drama. "Let's get out of here," Jake urged, his voice tight with urgency. But even as he spoke, the ground beneath them seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, anchoring them to the spot. Mary felt a compulsion to look back, to delve deeper into the mystery that lay before them, her body torn between the instinct to flee and the urge to uncover the truth. As if responding to their fear, the air shimmered, and for a fleeting moment, Mary thought she saw a flicker of light beyond the boundaries of the field, a dim glow that pulsed in rhythm with the echoes of the hum. It was an invitation, a beckoning into the unknown that sent a thrill of terror racing down her spine. "What is that?" Jake asked, his voice trembling as he pointed toward the faint illumination. "Are we really going to go closer?" Mary felt the tension coiling tighter around them, urging them forward. yet a voice within her screamed to retreat. The light flickered again, revealing a faint outline of geometric shapes etched against the backdrop of the night. They were intricate and mesmerizing, a language of patterns that defied comprehension, and the allure of the unknown was almost magnetic. I don't know," Mary stammered, her heart racing in her chest. "But we can't just leave." With every step they took toward the light, the shadows seemed to shift and ripple, an unseen force swirling around them, enveloping them in a cocoon of uncertainty. It was as if the darkness itself was alive, a sentient being aware of their presence, and the sensation of being watched intensified, making the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. As they neared the glow, Mary felt the air grow thick with a metallic tang, sharp and electric, an omen of the inexplicable that lay just ahead. The outlines of the formations shimmered in the darkness, their patterns shifting and morphing, drawing her closer, whispering secrets that beckoned her to understand. But with each step, the weight of her fear grew heavier, a visceral reminder that some truths were perhaps meant to remain buried, hidden in the shadows, far from the reach of curious minds. Then, in a flash that felt like a heartbeat, the light extinguished, plunging them back into darkness. A sudden chill swept through the air, wrapping around them like a vice, and Mary could feel the presence intensifying, something ancient and watchful lurking just beyond the veil of sight. The sensation of being observed was now undeniable, a cold suffocation that left her breathless. "Mary," Jake's voice broke through the darkness, a desperate plea laced with fear. "We need to go. Now." But before she could respond, a low growl reverberated through the night, a sound that was neither animal nor human, a primal warning that sent her heart racing. The darkness felt alive, and she realized with a jolt that they had crossed a threshold, stepping into a realm that defied explanation. Mary's heart thundered in her chest, and as she turned to flee, the shadows seemed to shift and swirl in her periphery, a reminder that they were not alone in this desolate expanse. They were participants in a cosmic mystery, and whatever watched from the darkness was far from benign. The night, once familiar, now felt like an alien world, a realm of secrets that threatened to consume them whole, leaving only whispers of their existence behind. As dawn broke over the sprawling fields of Maple Hollow, an eerie silence enveloped the land, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded the night before. The sun, a timid orb creeping over the horizon, cast a pale light that struggled to penetrate the deep shadows that clung to the earth like a shroud. Mary stood at the edge of the field, where the bizarre formations had appeared, her heart still racing, the remnants of fear a palpable presence in her chest. She felt as if the night had left its mark on her soul, a dark imprint she could not shake off. The formations lay before her, geometrical patterns etched into the earth with an almost unnatural precision. The crops, once standing tall, now lay bent and twisted, arranged in circles and spirals that defied logic. The morning dew glistened on the edges of the plants, sparkling like diamonds, yet the beauty was laced with an unsettling aura. A metallic scent lingered in the air, mingling with the rich soil, an unsettling reminder of the night's events. It felt as if the very ground beneath her feet was alive, pulsing with a strange energy that hummed just below her consciousness. Jake was beside her, his face pale, eyes darting nervously as if expecting the shadows to surge forth once more. "What do you think happened here?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would awaken whatever had lurked in the darkness. Mary shrugged, but her mind raced. "I don't know, but we need to figure it out." She stepped closer, drawn to the patterns that seemed to whisper secrets. The air was thick with tension, every breath feeling laden with unspoken words. The wind rustled through the fields, a shiver running down her spine as if the very essence of the land was trying to communicate. As they examined the formations, they noticed something odd. The plants were bent but not broken, a feat that defied nature's rules. How could vegetation be arranged so meticulously without a trace of destruction? Mary reached out to touch the edge of a circle, her fingers brushing against the soft leaves. An electric jolt shot through her, a sensation that was both exhilarating and terrifying, as if she had awakened something dormant within the earth. "Mary, look at this," Jake called, kneeling near one of the spirals. The ground was warm to the touch, almost as if it had absorbed heat from the night's mysterious events. He pointed to faint markings on the soil, symbols that resembled ancient runes, but their meanings eluded her. This has to mean something. Her heart raced as she knelt beside him, the markings igniting a spark of curiosity mingled with dread. "What if it's a warning?" she suggested, her voice trembling slightly. "What if whatever did this is still out there?" The thought hung heavy in the air, thickening the atmosphere around them. Suddenly a sound broke the silence, a low thrum vibrating through the ground, a resonance that felt like a heartbeat echoing from the depths of the earth. Mary's breath hitched, and she exchanged a glance with Jake, both of them frozen in place. The noise intensified, growing louder, reverberating through their bones. It was both mesmerizing and horrifying, pulling them deeper into the mystery, as if the land itself was awakening, whispering secrets of the cosmos that lay just beyond their grasp. The feeling of being watched returned, more pronounced now, as if the presence from the night before had not faded, but merely receded into the background, waiting. Mary could almost sense it, a palpable force that ebbed and flowed with the vibrations, a dark awareness that pierced through her heart. She fought the urge to look over her shoulder, fearing what might lurk in the shadows. "We should get help," Jake urged, his voice trembling with urgency. "We can't deal with this alone." But Mary hesitated, a part of her unwilling to leave. Something drew her to the formations, a magnetic pull that whispered of truths hidden in the dark. "Just a little longer," she insisted, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her insides. She needed to understand, to confront the mystery that had overshadowed their lives. As they stood there, the sun climbed higher, its light struggling to penetrate the thick veil of uncertainty that cloaked the field. The shadows shifted and danced, casting fleeting figures that seemed to taunt them, and Mary felt a chill settle deep within her bones. The world around them felt distorted, as if reality itself had been altered by the night's events. The sound pulsated again, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to synchronize with the beat of her heart. Mary closed her eyes, letting the vibrations wash over her, attempting to decipher the message embedded in the earth. It was as if the land was alive, and she was merely a visitor, an intruder in a sacred space where time and reality merged into something unfathomable. Then, in a heartbeat, the hum ceased, leaving an oppressive silence that swallowed all sound. The air felt different now, charged with an expectancy that made her skin prickle. She opened her eyes, scanning the horizon, but the fields appeared unchanged, yet she could sense a shift in the atmosphere, an undeniable tension that hung heavy in the air. "Did you hear that?" Jake whispered, his voice breaking the stillness, but Mary merely nodded, her eyes widening. They were not alone. The sensation of being watched returned, a weighty presence that seemed to envelop them, pressing down with an urgency that quickened her pulse. A rustle in the nearby thicket drew their attention, and they both turned sharply, breathless, hearts racing. Each moment stretched into an eternity, the anticipation electrifying the air around them. What lay beyond the trees? Was it merely the wind, or something far more sinister, waiting to reveal itself? As they stood at the edge of the field, caught between the known and the unknown, the sunlight bathed the landscape in a deceptive warmth, a stark contrast to the chill that gripped their hearts. The mystery of Maple Hollow deepened, and with it, the feeling that they were on the brink of uncovering something monumental, something that could shatter their understanding of reality itself. But at what cost? The ground beneath them seemed to pulse, a silent heartbeat resonating with the rhythm of the cosmos, beckoning them toward an inevitable confrontation with the darkness that lingered just beyond their reach. And as Mary took a step forward, she felt the weight of the moment press down upon her, a realization dawning that some mysteries were not just to be discovered. They were to be faced, regardless of the peril that lay ahead. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting elongated shadows that stretched across the field like dark fingers reaching for something lost. Mary and Jake stood at the precipice of change, their hearts pounding in sync with the whispering winds that seemed to carry secrets from ages past. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and the lingering metallic tang, wrapped around them like a shroud. Each breath was a reminder of their vulnerability, a reminder that they stood on sacred ground, a place where the veil between the known and the unknown was so thin it felt like it could rip apart at any moment. "Jake, what if it's watching us?" Mary's voice trembled, barely above a whisper, as she scanned the horizon once more, searching for the source of their unease. The thicket remained still, yet the sensation of being observed deepened, an invisible gaze penetrating their very souls. It was as if the land itself had eyes, an ancient consciousness that stirred beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to unveil its truths. Jake shifted beside her, his expression a blend of curiosity and fear. "Maybe it's just our minds playing tricks on us. This place, it messes with your head." Yet even as he spoke, the line of his jaw tightened, betraying the doubts that gnawed at him. They both felt it, a pulse beneath their feet, a rhythm of the universe that resonated with their own heartbeats, uniting them in a dance of apprehension. Then, without warning, a sound shattered the silence, a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the air, sending ripples across the field. It was a sound so profound, so otherworldly, that it felt as if it were emanating from the very core of the earth. Mary gasped, the sound wrapping around her like a cold embrace, and Jake's eyes widened, reflecting the fear and wonder that gripped them both. "What is that?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper as they both instinctively took a step back, the sense of danger escalating with every passing second. The hum grew louder, an omnipresent force that seemed to beckon them closer, urging them to uncover the enigma that lay buried in the soil. Breathless, they exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between them, a decision to confront the inexplicable. As they moved cautiously toward the center of the field, the ground seemed to shift beneath them, the earth trembling with a life of its own. The air was thick now, heavy with anticipation. Mary could feel the weight of history pressing down upon her, a tapestry of stories woven into the very fabric of the land. The crop circle, with its intricate patterns and folds, loomed ahead, a geometric marvel that appeared to pulse with an energy that was both enticing and terrifying. "Look," she pointed, her finger trembling as she indicated the center of the formation. The light seemed to shimmer, reflecting off the bent stalks of wheat in a way that defied logic. It was as if the very geometry of the circle was alive, a doorway to something beyond their comprehension. The patterns twisted and turned, creating an optical illusion that captivated her senses and drew her inexorably closer. Suddenly the hum intensified, a cacophony of vibrations that resonated in her bones, wrapping around her like an electric current. Jake grasped her arm, his grip firm and steady. "Mary, we shouldn't—" But the urgency in her heart drowned out his warning. She felt compelled, almost magnetically, to reach out and touch the ground, to connect with whatever force lay beneath them. As her fingertips brushed against the cool earth, a jolt of energy surged through her, igniting every nerve ending. It was as if the land had awakened, and in that moment of contact, the air crackled with a visceral power that threatened to tear the veil of reality asunder. The world around them blurred, colors swirling in a dance of chaos and beauty, and for a heartbeat, time stood still. Then, just as abruptly, The hum ceased, plunging them into a suffocating silence that echoed with the weight of unspoken horrors. Mary's breath caught in her throat as she pulled her hand back, a lingering warmth left behind as evidence of the connection she had forged with the land. The silence was oppressive, thick like fog, wrapping around them and suffocating any rational thought. The world felt distorted, as if they had crossed a threshold into a realm where the rules of nature no longer applied. Panic began to set in, a visceral fear clawing at her insides. "We need to go," she urged, her voice trembling. But as she turned to leave, something caught her eye. A glimmer of light that flickered at the edge of the field, beckoning her to look closer. It was a small object, half buried in the dirt, gleaming with an otherworldly sheen. "Mary, don't!" Jake's voice was a mixture of desperation and terror, but it was too late. She knelt down, brushing away the soil to reveal a small metallic disc, etched with symbols that felt both familiar and alien. The moment her fingers wrapped around it, a wave of energy surged through her, a connection that resonated deep within her soul. In that instant, everything changed. The ground beneath her seemed to pulse with an ancient rhythm, the air thick with the scent of ozone and the promise of revelation. The disc vibrated in her hand, a heartbeat of its own that echoed the pulse of the cosmos. She understood in some primal way that this object was a key, a fragment of a larger truth that had been hidden for eons, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover it. As she stood, the weight of the moment pressed down upon her, an overwhelming realization dawning. Some mysteries were not meant to be solved. They were meant to be lived, felt, and ultimately feared. The shadows lengthened around them, an encroaching darkness that whispered of secrets best left buried. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world into twilight, Mary and Jake felt the presence closing in, an unseen force that enveloped them in its chilling embrace. The sensation of being watched returned, a heavy blanket of dread that settled over them as the stars emerged in the night sky, twinkling like distant eyes bearing witness to their fate. In that haunting stillness, the question lingered: what would they do with the truth they had uncovered? As the first stars shimmered overhead, the realization that they were not alone in Maple Hollow settled deep within them, an unease that would forever bind them to the mystery of the land, a mystery that was only just beginning to unfold.